The flashlight beam cut through her bedroom window at 2:47 a.m., and in that split second before everything changed forever, Debbie Domingo thought it was just a neighbor checking their yard. She was 28, worked at a law firm in Goleta, and had just moved into the little duplex on Toltec Way with her boyfriend. They'd been talking about marriage, about starting fresh in this quiet college town where the biggest worry was whether the sprinklers would wake you up at dawn. Debbie kept a journal, wrote about wanting to travel to Spain someday, about how her boyfriend made her laugh until her sides ached. Normal dreams, the kind that should have had time to unfold. But someone else was writing her story now. It was July 27, 1981, and the man they'd eventually call the Golden State Killer had been watching her house for weeks, learning her routines, memorizing which floorboard creaked, which window latch was loose. He knew she worked late on Tuesdays, knew her boyfriend was out of town. He knew everything except her name, and somehow that made it worse. The attack followed his signature pattern, the flashlight in the face, the terrifying calm of his voice, the methodical brutality that would haunt investigators for decades. When it was over, when Debbie and her boyfriend were found murdered in a bedroom that should have been their sanctuary, the killer melted back into the California night like smoke. Here's the thing, he'd been doing this for years, decades, moving up and down the state like some nightmare traveling salesman, leaving broken lives scattered behind him like breadcrumbs. Except these breadcrumbs led nowhere. They just accumulated in police files, growing cold. The man behind the mask was Joseph James DeAngelo Jr., though nobody knew that name yet. To the world, he was a phantom with a dozen different nicknames. The East Area Rapist in Sacramento, the original Night Stalker in Southern California. Eventually, when investigators connected the dots spanning his reign of terror, the Golden State Killer. But before he became a monster, he was just another American kid growing up in the 1950s. Born in Bath, New York, moved around a lot as a child. His father was in the Air Force. The family eventually settled in California, where young Joseph seemed to blend into the suburban landscape. He joined the Navy, served on a destroyer, came back, and became a police officer. And here's where the story gets its particular brand of sick irony. DeAngelo spent 6 years as a cop in Auburn, California. He investigated burglaries by day and committed them by night. He took crime scene photos, wrote police reports, comforted victims, all while perfecting the very techniques he'd use to terrorize hundreds of people. The psychology of it sits in your stomach like a stone, doesn't it? In 1979, he was fired from the Auburn Police Department for shoplifting a hammer and dog repellent from a drugstore. Such a mundane end to his law enforcement career. But losing that badge didn't slow him down, it freed him. No more pretending to be the good guy during business hours. His crimes followed an evolution that still chills investigators. He started as a burglar, prowling through neighborhoods in the mid-1970s, getting off on the violation of the control. Then came the rapes, at least 50 confirmed victims, though the real number is likely higher. Young women, mostly, attacked in their own homes while their boyfriends or husbands were tied up and forced to listen. He was meticulous, almost compulsively so. He'd spend hours beforehand casing neighborhoods, sometimes breaking into houses just to move things around, to prove he could. He'd call victims before and after attacks, whispering obscenities, playing mind games that lasted years. Some women received calls decades later, his voice still recognizable after all that time. But rape wasn't enough. By 1979, he'd graduated to murder. Couples, mostly. Keith and Patrice Harrington, newlyweds killed in their home in Dana Point. Manuela Whithoon, beaten to death while house-sitting for friends. Janelle Cruz, just 18, murdered in her family's home in Irvine. Each crime scene told the same story. A predator who planned extensively, struck without warning, and disappeared like he'd never existed at all. He wore different shoe sizes, changed his voice, altered his methods just enough to muddy the investigative waters. The man was both completely organized and utterly chaotic, which is perhaps the most terrifying combination of all. For 40 years, Joseph DeAngelo lived in plain sight. He got married, had children, worked as a mechanic at a grocery store distribution center. His neighbors in Citrus Heights knew him as a quiet guy who kept his lawn perfect and occasionally lost his temper over property lines. He rode his motorcycle, tinkered in his garage, attended his daughter's school events. Nobody suspected that the soft-spoken grandfather down the street was responsible for 13 murders and countless rapes across California. The breakthrough came through genetic genealogy, a new technique that was revolutionizing cold cases. Investigators uploaded DNA from the Golden State Killer's crime scenes to public genealogy databases, the kind millions of people use to trace their family trees. They built a genetic profile working backwards through family connections, narrowing down suspects until they landed on one name: Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. On April 24, 2018, investigators watched DeAngelo leave his house to run errands. When he came back, they were waiting in his driveway. The arrest video shows a frail 72-year-old man in a cardigan, looking confused and elderly. Nothing like the predator who terrorized California for decades. But that's the thing about monsters. They age just like everyone else. Time catches up with them too. The evidence was overwhelming. DNA matched across multiple crime scenes. His work schedule as a police officer aligned perfectly with the timing and locations of early attacks. Items stolen from victims were found in his home. The case that had consumed investigators' careers for decades was solved in a matter of hours once they had the right name. In June 2020, DeAngelo pleaded guilty to 13 murders and admitted to dozens of rapes. The plea deal spared him the death penalty, but ensured he'd die in prison. During the sentencing hearing, victim after victim took the stand to confront the man who shattered their lives. Some spoke of decades of sleepless nights, of never feeling safe in their own homes. Others had spent 40 years wondering if he was still out there, still watching. A few said they'd actually felt relief when he was caught, not because justice was served, but because they finally knew he was just a pathetic old man, not the supernatural force of evil their nightmares had made him. He sat through it all in his wheelchair, saying nothing. Joseph DeAngelo is serving multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole at California State Prison in Corcoran. He's in protective custody, which means 22 hours a day in a concrete cell, alone with his thoughts and the weight of what he's done. The Golden State Killer case closed a dark chapter in California's history, but it opened new possibilities for solving cold cases through genetic genealogy. Dozens of other cases have been cracked using similar techniques. In some ways, DeAngelo's capture was the beginning of a reckoning for killers who thought time had made them untouchable. But for the survivors and the families of victims, no amount of justice can give back what was taken. No prison sentence can return a murdered daughter or erase 4 decades of fear. Some wounds don't heal, they just learn to live with scars. The house on Toltec Way in Goleta still stands. Someone else lives there now, probably unaware of what happened in that bedroom all those years ago. Debbie Domingo never made it to Spain, never got to see how her story might have unfolded. She exists now only in the memories of people who loved her and in the court documents that finally brought her killer to justice. Sometimes that has to be enough. Sometimes that's all we get.